Hello, and welcome to the Partner Strategy Network podcast. I'm Wesley Coelho, and I'm here with Mark Sochin, who's the author of The Art of Strategic Partnering. And we're here with our guest, Harpal Gill, who was most recently the general manager of the data group at Mobilize, which was just acquired by Snowflake. And Harpal, really excited to speak with you today and learn from some of your experiences. You've had so many executive sales and alliance roles and navigated through so many different acquisitions that just looking forward to hearing some of your perspective and experience.
Sure. No, likewise. Thank you. It's great to be here. Happy to share what I've kind of learned along the way. As you mentioned, I have had a number of different roles, everything from starting as an inside sales to alliance VP, and most recently, general manager of the group.
All right. And I understand you and Mark go way back, and you've got a partnership story to tell from your days at Crystal Reports, which was a business intelligence technology that was being pioneered at the time. And can you tell us the secrets of how you're killing your sales numbers in those days?
Sure. No, I'd be happy to share. Mark and I go back. We were just chatting about this a bit earlier, over 25 years, actually. So all of us started when we were like 5 years old. And I'm happy to share my road to success. As I mentioned earlier on, I actually started as an inside sales rep at Crystal Decisions. And that was my first role there. And I was overachieving actually in my role. And the reason I was doing that was one of the first things I did when I joined Crystal was to figure out what my territory was and who some of the key partners were in that area. And working with those partners, I figured a really quick strategy. If I could make 10 to 20 calls a day, well, what if I took half of those calls and made them with partners, and those partners did 10 to 20, the just sheer volume of calls and leads would grow a lot faster. And so that's kind of the model I leveraged. And I spent half of my time working with partners, half of my time direct with the leads that were coming in, and from there had a phenomenal experience. The penetration into the marketplace in my territory was quite good. And actually, I remember a story from my VP. He would always say, "Hey, what is it that you're doing different? You're killing these numbers, and how are you doing that?" And it all just came down to I said it's not. I'd like to say I'm the best sales rep and able to close everything. It's just the volume of leads. It's the old sales strategy. The more you put in the top of the funnel, the more you're going to have.
So Harpal, one of the things that really captured my attention is it's usually the VP of sales, will often instruct the salespeople, hey, you got to go work with partners, go collaborate with them. But actually getting salespeople to do that is more difficult. It's hard to get it in practice. And I'm just really curious from your story, your perspective, what was your motivation?
Yeah.
Why did you go out there and look up the partners in the area versus a lot of sales reps who just go it alone, I guess?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when we think of partnerships, and most software companies subscribe to a model where the partner gets anywhere from 10 to probably 30 points off a deal. And I think it's very short-sighted on a lot of the sales reps, but they just look at that as, why are we giving away those 10 to 30 points? To me, it was just, again, back to the math. If I was going to make 10 to 20 calls a day, and now I'm making 100 calls a day because I'm extrapolating all the leads that the partners are bringing in, that 10 to 30%, and usually it was always in the 10 to 15, 20%, that's a small piece to give away. And really, you were driving an annuity business, because as you train these partners, you got them ramped up, they were starting to bring leads. Your investment initially is very high. And so I spent a lot of time, and in our world, there's no such thing as a 9 to 5. And those early days with partners, yeah, there was some very, very long days. But then that annuity stream did so well that I was able to go pick and choose some of those strategic accounts that I wanted to drive in directly by myself. But it really came down to just the volume. How much more could they bring to the table? What value? And it was a great, phenomenal experience.
Wow, so you're really scaling yourself, essentially, right? Scaling up your time, and you put in the investment. So it's an interesting part of your story. You put in the investment up front, and that paid off for you down the road.
Totally. I mean, it's a joke I always say, but if you could clone yourself and you could get yourself to do multiple things. And the reality is, well, we're all probably going to be able to clone ourselves eventually. I don't know if that's going to be a good thing, but in the reality and the world we lived in and the world we still live in right now, the ability to leverage those partners and essentially clone your activities. So you're training them to do exactly what you would do. And there was a lot of, so I'll share some of the things we did. Not only did I do training for the partners, but when I go into the territory to meet a customer, I would make sure I met 2 or 3 partners every time I went down there. And we do a lunch and learn. I'd ramp their salespeople. I'd have them book appointments for me. So rather than me just go down and do 1 or 2, I'd be going down, and I wouldn't go down for a day or a half day. I'd go down for 3 or 4 days, and I was just getting lots of appointments. And again, it's the old model, right? If I get 100 in the top, probably 7 to 8 are going to close. So I need to just fill that as much as I can. And that's really all I was doing. It's always been a numbers game. I even went 1 step further, and with Crystal, we had the nice attribute that we were actually embedded in a lot of different OEM technologies. And so customers already had, when we think of leads, we think of cold calling, we think of warm leads, we think of a hot lead. And these OEMs were warm leads because they were already using the technology and they were invested in it. And so it was an easy discussion to say, hey, you're already using this. Why would you look at a competitive technology when we can go ahead and continue to have what you have and expand it? You've got the core competency, the experience of using it, a good experience with it, and it's already vetted by your IT group because it's installed already. And so sometimes I'd even do a 3-way partnership where I'd have my local SI in the Seattle area. There was a group called Solutions IQ, and I used to use them and go out with, we'd go to a .NET event that Microsoft would have. And so here's customers that already have Crystal that was embedded in there. Or maybe it was PeopleSoft was a big OEM at that point, so we would do that, or some of these other OEMs. And the beauty is, the hardest part was just picking which ones, because we didn't have 1 or 2, we had hundreds. And so what a great opportunity. And it almost seemed a waste to sort of not take advantage of that.
It's interesting here to tell this story because a lot of times for a lot of software companies, the direct sales teams doesn't like OEM sales because they feel like the product's being cannibalized. It could have been pennies on the dollar that they could have taken 100 cents on the dollar if the direct sales team could have taken it directly. So, it's great to hear your story about how there's actual leverage created and you made it work. And one of the things I wanted to ask you was, when you decided to work with partners, first of all, I mean, you had a long view of it because you had to give up some of your percentage margins. Some companies, they don't do that. They fully compensate the rep, whether it's a partner involved or not. But I am curious if you'd tell more about, which partners would you choose to work with? Would you just kind of work with them all and then see which ones were producing fruit? I've also seen situations where, you partner with the best of intentions, but it's really both sides are expecting that the other one's going to bring them the lead. So, how did you find that work?
It's sales and alliances are very similar. In sales, we go through a whole lead qualification process. We identify the lead, we talk to them, we determine the need, things like that. The partnership model is not very different for me. I go in, I talk to the partner, I meet with them, I invest probably 2 to 3 cycles with them to validate. Are these a good partner? Are these people interested in investing and doing something with us? And, it's the same process. So in the Northwest, there was probably at least a dozen different partners I had a choice of. And I really polarized towards 3 or 4 because, like anything in sales, I can only manage so many sales cycles. I'd like to sit here and tell you I can manage them all. The reality is you only have so many hours in that day. And so I would pick the top partners, and then I'd keep them all sort of no different than nurturing a lead. I'd nurture partners. I use the same philosophy that I had in sales for my partnerships. And so from that perspective, the local SIs, I'd validate, I'd score them, I'd figure out which ones are, when I do a lunch and learn and they bring 100 people, that's amazing. okay, that tells me that they're really invested. They're taking people out of their day, out of their field, bringing them into the office to sit down with me and listen to me. And once we get past the fact that I'm flattered that they did all that, I'm like, okay, these guys are serious. Let's make this happen. And it's like anything in the sales cycle. You try and get to the highest level as quick as possible. So for me, with Solutions IQ, their founder was a gentleman named Doug Wright. I polarized as quickly as I could to get right to the top. Same thing. There was a company called Best Consulting, went straight to the top. And again, if they're giving you access and you then can ask the hard questions. Is this something that makes sense now? Is it something you're looking to invest in? Why this over your other partnerships? And really, it came down to the fact that, A, they were looking for a business line and a partner themselves. So they wanted to do this, but they weren't getting the same input sometimes, or other reps weren't really engaging with them at that level, or they were cutting them out. And I was the complete opposite. I was a huge fan of levering partners. I'll even go talk about a program, if you want it, that I built after being in direct sales for a while.
Yeah, that's a super intriguing story, and I think there's just so many lessons for people to learn from that. And then, Harpal, after your Crystal days, you had this great run as the VP of Global Alliances for Connects Group, and in that role, different type of partners. You were partnering with all of the heavyweights: Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, SAP, Micro Focus, you name it, CA, HP. And so, what a tremendous experience working with the heavyweights of the industry, and just, wanted to hear, what you could share with us about the lessons learned, about how you were able to land those partnerships in the first place and then keep them on the rails.
Sure. So maybe for context, let me go back a step and just sort of share what Connects did and sort of the space, because it's very different than the BI space. So Connects was really, they were an ETL player in the legacy ETL space. So think of the Informaticas and the data integrations and companies like that. This was an ETL for legacy. So think of mainframe, OpenVMS, AS400s. These are big platforms that have been around for decades in the mainframe for over 6-7 decades. So these are technologies that are very embedded in a lot of different environments, especially in the Fortune 5000. If you think of some of the largest companies in the world, we're going to see some of these infrastructures. And Connects was really all about helping people get to that legacy data, which was unlike a SQL Server or any of these modern databases that we have. But these were coded, maybe a columnar or a different type of, we call them hierarchical, very different databases. So you couldn't just take a Crystal Reports or a BI tool, connect to it, and just start writing. You needed some sort of SQL interface, because all BI tools leverage SQL technology, structured query language, SQL, not SQL, the database. And they use that to connect. So we created a SQL interface that allowed you to move data from these technologies into a data warehouse or a data lake, or just connect directly to them. And with Connects, it was because these technologies were vetted out or installed in these huge organizations, Fortune 5000 companies. It wasn't that hard to work with some of the large players, because a lot of the companies, so in the case of Microsoft, AWS, they were looking to get these data warehouses put into their environments, data lakes as we call them now, in the cloud. And so we were making these solutions to help them do this hybrid sort of back and forth. And we were working with some of the largest GSIs, so the Accentures, the Deloittes, the Indian SIs, when we think of Wipro, TCS. These are all large organizations that had centers of excellence focused on creating access, doing business intelligence analytics, helping sustain or manage these environments, these legacy environments. And so it was easy to show them what we were doing, how we were doing it. And then that's kind of the services side. And then the ISV side, you've got companies like Software AG, Micro Focus, CA. These are all organizations that had large technologies in this legacy space that they wanted to be able to enhance. And our technology would enhance that. So again, that I always think of how many different ways. I look at sales as a chess game, and I look at how many different ways can I play this and strategize. And so the three-way came up again, where I would partner with an SI. I would bring an SI in. I'd go to a software AG and I'd say, hey, would connect we all three of us can play together and we can figure out how to help this customer do more. And what we're finding is there are some companies that are looking to migrate out of these legacy environments. But these are mission critical systems of record that have been around for a long time. And the large telcos in North America, whether they be in Canada or in the US, they're all using mainframes. And it's just sheer volume of number of transactions, volume of data. And so they're looking at leveraging that data to be able to analyze and understand and figure out different ways to create better plans for their customers, more ways to leverage those existing customers to, I don't want to use the word extract, but really gain more money from them by learning what their habits are and creating ways in doing that. So that's what we did. We helped a lot of these people.
If I could interrupt you
please.
there, can you share a little bit about what were the differences in working from Crystal and the partner program there, and then you went to Connects? Can you share and highlight some of the differences in terms of the partnering strategy, the mix of partners? You mentioned GSI partners versus some of the smaller partners and ISVs. Can you just kind of contrast and compare that?
Yeah, great question. And yes, happy to. So when we think of Crystal, we were thinking of all size customers. And in my territory, I was working in the Western region, mainly the Pacific Northwest, and that included Idaho, Montana. So the companies in that space were more of the Fortune, I would say the SMBs versus the Fortune 5,000. Sure, there were a few multi-billion-dollar companies, the Microsofts, the AT&Ts, the Starbucks of the world, but the majority were SMBs. So in that particular marketplace, the SMBs, they tend to leverage and work much better with the local SIs. They have the right sort of mix, interface, cost structures that benefit each other. Whereas the GSIs are really interested in the Fortune 5,000. When we think of these legacy plays and we think of, again, the mainframe, the Open VMS, the AS400, these are companies that have been around for multiple decades, mainly Fortune 5,000. There were some smaller players, but because they were Fortune 5,000, the SIs that were already there weren't the local players. They were the much larger mainframe centric. Well, let's think of the mainframe. So when you think of the mainframe, there's multiple databases there. IMS, vSAM, these are legacy data sources, database, and these are very complex. So this is not something that a local vendor will have 4 or 5 users on. This is an account that will have 100 to maybe 1,000 consultants working there at any given time. So much larger footprint. And so that was really the difference. And then the ISVs, they're far fewer. They're much, they're again, with the mainframe, when we think of the mainframe, we think of IBM, who owns the platform. We think of the technologies they build, but then we think of CA, BMC, Software AG. I could probably count them on 2 hands versus when we think of Crystal, there was literally hundreds of ISVs or OEMs. So right. Very different ecosystem and just really a function of the size of the customers.
But what about, you talked about working with GSIs. Is there any kind of secret sauce you can share there about, how you're able to effectively work with the GSI partners?
Yeah, so great. That's a good question. And really it came down to understanding. So whenever I look at a partnership, or a partner, I look at what is their win and what are they doing? And in the mainframe space, it made it a little bit easier. There's multiple, but I'm just going to focus on one, and we'll talk about the mainframe. All the large SIs, the GSIs, the Accentures, the Deloitte, the Indian SIs, they have what we call a COE, or Center of Excellence, built around a particular platform. So if we think of the mainframe, and then we go even a little further, subset that to Software AG's database and natural. So database is the database, natural is the language on top of it that you make these custom applications on. If we look at...
So just for our audience, the Center of Excellence, this would be like a demo center and where customers would come and take a look at stuff?
Yeah, no, it's so let's drill into that a bit further. A Center of Excellence is really I'll give you the example of TCS. So TCS created a center of excellence just for the software AG product. So what does that mean? Well, that means they had, and they told me somewhere between 700 and 800 people that are trained and are working at customers that have software AG technologies deployed. So these are people that whenever you want to do an update or you want to do a refresh or you want to enhance the program, these are people that understand the technology intimately. Unlike Crystal, you can't just go get mainframe programmers anywhere. Whereas with Crystal, it was SQL-based technology, again, structured query language, and everyone coming out of university is learning that. In university today, no one's teaching COBOL, no one's teaching database, no one's teaching these languages. So what happens is these are graduates that have graduated with an engineering degree. They go to a large SI, and these large SIs have internal trainings, and they teach, train, and then test their employees. And the ones that pass, no different than graduating from school. You graduate and then you get put into the center of excellence. And then you're qualified to go ahead and work at these different organizations. And again, because they are very, very large organizations, they have a rigid process on who can come in and work on their technologies.
And did you drive a lot of services with Connects? And is that one of the ways that you attracted the GSIs?
So what we did was we enabled. It was all about enabling. So if we think of, I'll use the database technology. It's a hierarchical database. So you can't bolt any BI tool out there and connect to a database directly. You need an interface. And Connects made this interface. So I could then go out to the SIs and say, if you want to be able to write reports for your customers, and there's a huge BI competency, BI need, analytics need. People, if we think of data, data is the currency today. For companies to do more, they want to understand their data. And so there's a lot of consulting that goes into putting people on site to do these kinds of things, learn from the data, building reports, analytics, multi-dimension cubes, things like that.
Got it. So you were an enabler for them to go and get the data that they needed. Correct. That was associated with the services that they're delivering.
In the whole process, we were probably the least we were the most inexpensive part there. We were the cheapest part.
Yeah.
But without us, nothing was going to happen. The data wasn't going to flow.
Makes sense. And then, so Connects was ultimately acquired by Software AG. Correct. And just hoping you could share with us a bit about, you had this massive alliance strategy. What impact did that have on the acquisition?
Great question. So at Connects, I was, my whole task was everything go to market. So really the company, I ran everything from direct sales, marketing, and alliances globally. And we were a small niche player in the ETL space. But because of those partnerships that I grew, we were able to, when I joined the company, the goal was to build up the revenue, build up the partnerships, and then take it to an exit. The owner was at the point where he wanted to exit within a 4 to 5 year window. So it actually took me.
And were there no partnerships when you started?
There were a couple. There was about 5. So we grew that. There was no formal partnership with any of the GSIs. The partnerships they had were OEMs that were basic OEMs with some legacy players. So we grew that. So we basically grew that whole organization out, tripled the revenue. And I was able to bring, in any exit, you want to bring multiple parties to the table. So we were able to bring 3 different parties to the table. As they came, we sort of went through the due diligence.
Sorry to interrupt. That were your partners, right?
Yeah.
So you brought these partners. You partnered with them, and that's who came to the table for the acquisition.
Yeah. So we basically, at 4 years into it, we said, hey, we're looking at doing an exit, started talking to these organizations. They had already seen the value that Connects brings to the table. And so it made sense. 3 of them came to the table. They were looking to acquire this technology. And Software AG was the ultimate winner of that. But yeah, that's how we went through it.
Okay. That's great. And then fast forward to Mobilize.net, which exited to Snowflake. Was the partner role there the same?
Yeah, so when I joined Mobilize, let me give a little background on Mobilize. So Mobilize was building automation tools. So when we think of moving from a legacy database, and now legacy is different for Snowflake, we're not thinking of the mainframe. They're thinking of Oracle, SQL Server, Teradata. So those were their big proponents, DB2, those kinds of relational databases. You would think,
Got
how
it.
hard could it be? Just take the data and put it over there. Well, it's not the data that's the challenge. Now it was all about moving all that SQL logic, all that embedded SQL, whether it be stored procedures. In the case of Teradata, there's some proprietary objects called BTEC, fast load, multi-load. So all of that code needed to be converted and put into Snowflake. And Snowflake's a relatively new tool. It was JavaScript based. It had SnowScript and SnowSQL. So what Mobilize was doing is they were building automation tools to learn the patterns, learn that code, and then convert it and move it over to Snowflake. And that's when I joined. The tool was only being used by Snowflake in their professional services. And so it was just an easy thing for me to look at and say, you need to go wider within Snowflake, and then you need to figure out who they're playing with, and let's bring those SIs in. And so that's what I did. When I joined the company, I started broadening the approach into Snowflake. I went to their partner group. I went direct to their sales teams, showed them what we were doing, and then went out and figured out who their key SIs they were dealing with. Funny enough, a lot of the same players I'd used to connect. So I had inroads there already. Just went to find the new center of excellence for Snowflake and get introductions to those players from my old colleagues or old contacts, and was able to build those relationships out.
So that was a partnership that you picked up on, ran with, and grew that into what ultimately became the exit of the business and the acquisition by Snowflake. That's incredible.
Correct. And so from there, we kind of, the whole process actually evolved much quicker. When I joined Mobilize, the concept was a 3 to 5 year exit. And so I started the plan with that and added, as I mentioned, I brought in SIs. I brought in some local SIs or specialty SIs that were in the financial services arena or maybe the entertainment. And then we also went direct to customers. And so we broadened that approach. We had 81% year over year growth. And actually in November, about 11 months of me being there, Snowflake approached us and said, hey, you guys are growing too fast. We're going to have to acquire you before you get too expensive. And the deal actually closed in February. So,
wow, congrats. Yeah, absolutely. So just wanted to switch gears now and ask you a little bit about your experience with, the topic that's on the minds of so many alliance leaders these days, which is, how to make the most of your alliance with the public cloud platforms like Amazon AWS. And just wanted to see if you had any experience there and any insights to share with folks on how to make that work.
Yeah, happy to. So when we think of AWS and Amazon Web Services, I think of the whole public cloud, the whole what we call the hyperscalers. And it's not just AWS, but it's Azure, it's GCP with Google Cloud Platform. And I would even throw Snowflake in there, because Snowflake is now building out an infrastructure that they will bring applications and it'll be powered by Snowflake. So we're going to see a lot more of that. And I have had a lot of experience, one with Snowflake, but when the Connect days, we did a lot with Azure and AWS. And really it was, what's the value you're bringing to them? So when you think of the cloud, really there's a concept of how do we get a lot of this infrastructure on-premise into the cloud? And with in my Software AG, Connect Software AG days, a lot of these companies, again, are Fortune 5,000 companies. They have, let's say they have a mainframe application. They're adding new applications all the time, but because of the value of the cloud, the elasticity, the ease of use, low maintenance, they're looking to deploy technologies up there. So now the concept is, how do you go back and forth? And that's where a tool like Connect enables hybrid data movement from your mainframe tooling into your cloud application, or maybe you're moving into a cloud data lake or a Databricks for ML workloads, things like that. Or maybe you're taking data that's being collected in an expense system that's in the cloud, but you want to share it with your system of record on premise. And that's where we would do that. So we actually were pretty enticing to both Amazon and AWS, GCP as well. And I'll share with you that all of those players are looking to eventually get that mainframe workload into the cloud. But the first step is having that hybrid integration, and they all have large mainframe strategies today.
Got it. All right. Any final words of advice from you, Harpal, before we end up?
I'll go back to my early days in sales and tell you that I was the first rep to go 3 consecutive and 5 consecutive president clubs. And so anyone that sits there and tells me, hey, I don't know if I should give up this 10 or 20 or 30 points, I would say don't even think about it. Just do it, because the value is you will be able to be much more successful, and you'll have a better balance of opportunities. And once you've built that, I mean, how nice is it to be able to say that, hey, every quarter, I'm just going to get 50%, 60% of my quota, because my partners now are bringing those deals in, and I can go find those elephants where I want. That's a beautiful thing that you can now learn. I always tell people it's all about working smarter, not harder. So yeah, partnering is I'm a huge proponent. Anyone I tell, if they want to debate the discussion, why partners versus not, let's have it. I'll show you.
That's
I'll show
incredible.
you the successes.
Yeah. Wow, those are fantastic insights. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your experience and tips that everybody should really know in our space.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure. It's nice to have this conversation. Great.
Excellent.
Great to reconnect with you, Harpal.
Yeah, likewise.
All right. Yeah, and then to connect with Harpal, you can join the discussion. You can come find us at the Partner Strategy Network LinkedIn group. Thanks a lot.